Hey, it's KPro. I want to show you KodeWizard, which is a little tool I put together for searching the DayZ source code with doce and grep. The first time you open the tool, you can immediately go into the doce view. The doce view of the code is super useful and I find helpful for me as a beginning modder to visualize the code and see the relationships, because you can move back and forth between files with hyperlink clicks. And it has some really useful views into the data. See all of the methods that are in the game. That might be useful, for example, if you want to know what kind of sorting methods there are. That's a question I had a few days ago. And you can just click on S, go to sort, and quickly see that there's an array sort class, and you can hyperlink to it if you want, and see that there are two methods in the array class if you didn't already know that for sorting. You can go back and forth, and one neat thing is you can create bookmarks in the code. For example, if you want to, I had bookmarked the key codes. You can just click and get right there. I think that's super useful, particularly for the newer modder who doesn't know the DayZ source code back and forth and know where everything is. Doce is really amazing, and I find it super useful, but it does have its limitations. Mainly, I find that the search is a huge problem, because it will only find words at the beginning of lines, basically. So, for example, it's going to find, if we search for sort, it's going to find some things that we would expect, like the sort method, but it's not going to find, for example, any time that sort was used. So you can kind of get that information using another great feature of the doce tool. It has references, and it'll list all of the instances that it's identified where the particular method has been used. That's what these hyperlinks are down here, and we can just click on it and see that array has been, or the sort routine has been used. Just highlight it there, here, but it's not going to find that. You notice it didn't list it when we searched for sort. It's not going to find, for example, a usage myArray.sort, that sort of thing. Its internal search engine is not designed for that. You can't do any kind of complicated multi-word searches or anything like that either. And sometimes there are ways to work around it by following the hyperlinks. But if you go to the documentation, and then if you're in the source code rather, you can search for the words, find all the uses within that file. There's only one in this case. But it's a real limitation, and I found that it leads you to miss stuff, and you think maybe it's not in the database, but it is in the database, you just can't search for it. The way to address that, or at least one way to address that, is to do some kind of textual search using Notepad++ or a grep tool to go through the database that way. The problem with those tools generally is that although they'll find what you're looking for, the view isn't as great and there aren't the hyperlinks. I like to use a grep tool. DNgrep is an open source tool. So if you're using KodeWizard for anything other than the doce view, then you'll need to set up the DNgrep. And we can do that here. If you're comfortable with install winget, you can just click and it'll install grep for us. But if that seems scary, you can just click on this link and it'll take you to the grep get, and you can kind of read and get comfortable and download and install it that way. Either way, you just need to tell the tool where grep is. So that it knows how to find it. And then you also need to tell it where you want to search, where the game scripts folder is. Generally, it's going to be P scripts, and that's where it is for me, so I'm just going to check that. You only have to do that once. It remembers after you do it. And now you can use grep. You can do a simple grep by, say, searching on sort. And then it's going to open up the grep tool. And it's similar to Notepad++. It's going to give you a list of options. However, it has a bunch of other features that are really quite cool, like the ability to have the pane on the right open up and show you, all of the source code, and you can kind of walk through it. And another thing that's cool is that you can sort by the match count. And if you do a descending match count sort, you often can find the files or classes that are most relevant. Like here, sort's been mentioned 156 times. You can click on that and try to see, what's going on, and we see that it's mentioned so often because sort is part of the name of some variables that are used. So that is super cool. You can do regular expression searches, which is also helpful. Now, one thing that's really powerful is you can search in the results. So I could say, okay, I've got all of these files that mention sort, and now I want to see files that also mention array. And we can get a list of those. And we find the references to array and references to sort. All right. Now, D&grep implements a full regex. So I used that to create, I think, some useful search options. And I'm going to add more as I find a need for them and figure out how to do them and put them in. But one thing that is helpful that I had wished for a lot is, say, for example, you wanted to find two words near each other like sort and array. And you decide whether you care, that sort must be before array, or you don't care about the word order. And then you can click search near, and it's going to, find a lot fewer references. But we see array and sort are near each other. So that's, I think, helpful. And then this one here is if you want to find, say, you're interested in how the vanilla code handles refs with arrays, you could search for ref and array in the same line and decide whether word order matters. I think not. Hit search, and then you get this. You'd get a list of examples how ref and array are sort of used in the source code. So all of that is cool. It's just really putting two useful tools together in one place. The one thing that I did that I think is particularly neat is I was frustrated at having to use, I was using Notepad++ to search through the code, but then I would get a view that I just didn't look very good to me, and I felt it was sort of hard to use, and I really felt the absence of the hyperlinks. And so then I would want to go back in and go back. I was using Leroy's implementation of Doxygen, which is more or less the same thing that I've done, except his is a web implementation and mine's local on your computer. The reason why I made it local on your computer is for the following. Let's say we want to look at this class in Doxygen. We can right-click, open with a custom editor, and boom, now we're in the Doxygen view with the various hyperlinks and reference links, so that you can kind of have the best of both worlds. You can still go to the source code, except you have this much nicer view, and I think easier to read. So you can really go back and forth. If you go back down to the magnifying glass icon, you can flip back into your list and move around as you want. So the last thing that I need to show you is one final setup issue, is if you want to be able to link back and forth between the Doxygen view and the grep view, what you need to do one more setup thing, which is come into setup here, options, and the custom editor has to be defined as this linking executable that I created that links the source code that D&grep is finding to the HTML version that Doxygen generates. So it's simple enough. You hit the three dots, you're going to find where I've put open code dot .exe. That's going to be in the doce subdirectory of wherever you installed KodeWizard. So, I mean, this is the directory structure of KodeWizard, and within the doce there is open code, and then hit OK. I've set it up so open code is where it needs to be, but it has to live immediately outside of the folder that's containing all of the Doxygen stuff. And then once you do that and hit OK, now you're going to be able to use the right, and then put %file in the argument section, save, close, and now you're going to be able to right click and move back and forth between the two. I want to show you one more thing. I want to point you to Doxygen. I created a little tab here so you can go quickly to the Doxygen documentation and also the Doxygen download. You don't need to download Doxygen to use this tool because I've already done it. However, the tool does need to be kept up to date. Doxygen has to be rerun after every update if it's going to have absolutely everything in it and be as completely accurate as possible. I've done one thing to try to make it this a little easier is I selected the option here that shows when the file has been run. So this was created yesterday, and you can always check down here and then find out if there's been an update, and if there hasn't been, then you know this is completely up to date. If there's been an update, I am going to try to keep the Doxygen documentation up to date on my Git, but I might get busy and not do it or just forget about it, in which case you might decide that you want to do it on your own, and it's really super simple. So this isn't, obviously Doxygen is a huge, if you haven't heard of it before, it's like a huge open source tool. You can use it for anything. You could use it to document your own mods if it was particularly complicated. For example, I've created a Doxygen source to search through CF because it's such an amazing contribution to the community, but sometimes I have trouble like knowing if there is a feature of CF that is going to be useful to me. So you can use it for anything. You just go to the download the current repository, whatever it is for your operating system. For me, it's 1.9.6 for Windows. Install it. It's really easy to install. And I just want to show you really quick what it looks like. So you open up, it's called KodeWizard after you install it. And you have a ton of, you can go directly through what they're calling the wizard, click over to run and run it. But then in the expert view, there's all of these different ways to customize what you want. That's why mine is another reason why mine is a little different from Leroy's, because I based it on the computer itself so I could do those links. And also I included absolutely everything that I could possibly include so that the searching is as strong as it can be. And then, you just run. What you can do, I've included the tweaks that I put together. So if you like the way I did it, you can just open the settings and it's current. It'll be in there called current. And then literally all you would have to do is open this up, load the current, run Doxygen. It takes a few seconds to run, less than 90. And then your documentation is 100% up to date. You do it as often as you like. And I promise you, if you download Doxygen, you're going to go down a rabbit hole of doxing everything you possibly can. So that is Doxygen. And that's pretty much it. If you have any suggestions of special searches that I should include, I'll be happy to play around with that and figure out how to do that and add them in. You can always build your own grep instruction. Like for example, if we wanted to find ref, array, and string all within one line, if that even exists, I'm sure it does. You can see here, this is what tool built. And you can obviously roll your own regex expressions to search whatever you want. But if you come up with something really cool that is particularly useful for DayZ coding, send me a message and I'm happy to add it in so that it can be really easily accessed. that is it. Thank you very much, and a happy new year to everyone. I hope you find this useful.